Welcome to Ordinary to Badass. Whether you're ordinary or badass, I'm so glad you're here. Today's guest is Lorna Green. Lorna, thank you so much for being here. Excited to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Marie.
So, before we go any further, I've got to ask you, do you consider yourself ordinary or badass?
That is such a great question. And one that often I think women find really hard to answer because I think inside us we want to say I'm completely badass, but outwardly we go, oh, I'm just ordinary. And it took me a lot of years to get to a point where I could say confidently, I am totally badass.
Yes, I love
um, yeah. So yeah, I think I am anything but ordinary.
it. So, was there a turning point for you? Like, was it one specific instance or was it several things that led you to feel like a badass?
Well, I think it was an evolution. I think that would be the correct word to use. Back in around 2007, I became quite ill. Uh, Nothing that anybody could put their finger on. I think I took a virus. That virus then went into kind of post-viral syndrome. And I kind of lingered for for a fairly almost half a year, about 6 months actually. I was just sleeping all of the time, really demotivated. I realize now looking back, I was depressed. And as the result of that, I kind of lost everything that we value, I think, as humans, or certainly everything that I valued at that time. I had three spa businesses. I had to file for bankruptcy. I lost the lot. I lost every penny that I had made in the last decade because obviously being bankrupt, all my money went. I lost my home. A 16-year relationship ended. I literally had the clothes I stood up in, and even they were kind of falling off me because I was so ill. I was losing weight really rapidly. So I was in this place. This happened in my mid 30s. And in my mid 30s, I was in this place where I was asking myself, is this it for me? I've failed. I have lost everything that I valued. Is this my life? Like, where do I go from here? And I made the decision to move away from everything I knew at that time because everything I knew felt painful in that moment. Everything I knew was just desperately horrendous. I didn't want to be in places where I recognized this relationship. I didn't want to be in places where I could see my business where it used to be and it wasn't my business anymore. And so I kind of decided that I needed to get away from the pain. And in doing so, I moved to a tiny island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. I moved to the Maldives. And it was there where I found myself the opportunity to heal, the opportunity to realize that there was so much more to the world than my little bubble that I had lived in for so long. And it was there that I realized that calling myself a failure was doing myself a great disservice. Yes, I'd lost my businesses. Yes, I'd become ill. Yes, my relationship ended. Maybe outwardly that could be considered failures, but I was reminded while I was out there that the only failure is to not try. I tried and I was successful for a long time and I got sick and it ended. But you know what? I learned from it and I grew from it. My relationship ended, yeah, because it had run its course. It was the right thing to do to let that go and let it go with love. And it opened me up to new and different relationships. So that was the turning point, I think, for me to recognize that I was more than just my business. I was more than just the money that I made. I was more than just the relationships that I was in. And it was out there that I discovered, I guess, who I was. In my mid 30s, kind of asking myself the question, can I put a roof over my head? Can I feed myself? Can I earn money? Can I make friends? And the answer to all of those questions was, yeah, of course you can. And you can do it in style and you can do it in the most amazing ways. And it triggered a life that I know it wouldn't suit everyone. I totally understand that. But it triggered this very nomadic existence for the last 10 to 12 years, actually. I've pretty much been homeless for that time and loved every second of it. I've lived in parts of the world that people only dream about. I spent a great deal of time in Asia, in the Middle East. I've lived in Europe, South Africa, Australia, and enjoying the experience of being around new people, different cultures, just enjoying the gifts that the world has. And I think that makes me pretty badass.
I love that. There were so many great nuggets in there that I really can't wait to dive in and pick apart. And it was so cool that you chose to just go to the Maldives and figure it out on your own. And I'm sure that that gave you a bit of confidence after that, going forward.
It did. At the time, looking back on it, yes, it was absolutely the best thing that I could have done. At the time, it was one of the probably one of the most terrifying things I've ever done in my life to realize, like, when you're in your mid 30s and you wake up one day and you realize that you've never made an adult decision on your own in your entire life. Because I went from living with my family to living with my partner. I met my partner at the age of 16.
Mm.
And so, we'd been together. I was 35 when we split up. And so nothing in my life had ever been just me on my own. And that was a really terrifying place to be. And to compound that by moving to a part of the world where I knew nobody, I had no support, I had no network, I had nobody around me, was, on the one hand, it was like, wow, is this the biggest piece of insanity? And, I've done some fairly insane things in my life, but, there was this question of, wow, what are you doing? But the other side of that was, isn't it great? Nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows my history. Nobody knows that I've just lost my businesses and this relationship's ended. So people are just going to get to know me for me. And I get to be me. And nobody's going to go, oh, you're different now, or you've changed since I last saw you. And so the terrifying part got completely outweighed by the possibility of what lay ahead for me.
Yes, so good. Oat to beers. Sometimes you got to do the hard thing, you got to do the terrifying thing to get the good result at the end. So you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit. So I love that. So, Lorna, can you share a little bit about yourself?
About what I'm doing now, or
Yeah,
just about me in general, who I am.
you can
Um,
share a little bit about yourself in general and then what you're doing now.
okay, cool. Well, my name is Lorna Green. You can probably hear from the accent that I was born and bred in Scotland in the UK. I started out my life as a hairdresser and a spa therapist. I've always been very drawn to modalities of work where I'm around other people. I've always had that connection of wanting to wanting to make people feel better in some way. As a beauty therapist, it was always something that I greatly enjoyed, seeing people come into my salon, maybe not feeling at their best, maybe not looking at their best, and leaving standing up taller with their head held high because their skin feels better, or they have these beautiful eyebrows, or their nails look amazing. So I've always loved being in that kind of environment. And over the years, I've kind of transitioned from more of the sort of spa and beauty side into a more holistic experience. And I became a yoga teacher around about the time I was going through this kind of mad transition in my mid 30s. I moved into the yoga side, and I'm now, I think, I hope, Marie, I hope I am the embodiment of what it means to live your life on your terms. I'm 48 years old. I'm single. I teach yoga. I take flying trapeze lessons. I go wild swimming at the weekends. My life is what I want it to be. My age is not a factor in that. And the freedom and choices that I have been afforded in my life are just are vast, and it brings me so much pleasure to be able to share that message, to stand up as I hope a role model. And I say I hope because obviously people have very different perceptions. I know how I see myself, how other people see me. Well, you know what, that's their business. But I always hope that I am a role model for people who are maybe in a similar position, because there's a lot of nonsense, a lot of limiting beliefs around age, and especially for women, that we should be doing something by a certain age. You should be married, you should have children, you should, look a certain way, you should behave a certain way. A couple of years ago, I remember I was pole dancing before COVID. I've been pole dancing since I was about 40. Just adore the environment, the experience, all of that. And I remember being in a pole class a few years ago. Well, one of the girls had asked me, "How old are you?" Because I'd said something about my life. Oh, I've lived here and I've done this, and I reeled off a bunch of stuff. And she just looked at me and she went, "Hang on, hang on. How old are you?" And at the time, I think I was maybe like 45 or something. So I told her. And this kid just kind of looked at me, stepped back, and went, "You're the same age as my mum." And I was like, okay. Amazing. And she went, "My mum would never do what you're doing." And in that moment, I thought to myself, why not? What's stopping her? Why can't she do it? What is it about us that we kind of we seem to attribute age to certain things that we are allowed to do or not allowed to do. And I think that preconception is getting much better, but there's still a lot of limiting belief around that. So I want to be that role model that says, your age is just a number, forget it. I was hula hooping earlier today and playing on the swings at the park. Like, why not?
Yes. No, I think it's so important because it's like we hold ourselves back from all of these things that could bring us joy or bring us more life and more energy. And it's like we worry too much. What is that person going to think? What is that person going to think? And it's like, who cares, And I guess it's easy to say that sometimes, but like once you actually start doing it, I would imagine that it gets a little bit easier each time. Has that been true for you?
Yeah, I would say so. I still have I do still hold on to the idea that the outside world has an opinion of me, and it does influence me at times. But what I've found as I've got older is I'm much better at recognizing when that happens. And when I recognize it, I have the tools to work through it. So instead of, hiding away because somebody posted a nasty comment on social media, or somebody said something that may be a little derogatory or negative, instead of letting those things influence who I am, I'm far more equipped now to step back from that situation and say, okay, is this person right? Do I agree with what they're saying, or am I happy with the direction that I'm taking? And if so, well, you know what? I'm going to continue on that path. My mum always had a great phrase saying that she would repeat often when my sister and I were children. And it was quite simply, if you're not hurting yourself and you're not hurting anyone else, go do your thing. Go do whatever it is that you want to do. And
Yeah.
I've held that with me for a long time. But yeah, I was very much influenced by external validation when I was younger. And I think that was actually one of the reasons that I went into the spa world and worked as a beauty therapist for a long time, because I needed to hear people say, I could wax someone's legs, and a client would say, Lorna, that was the best leg wax I've had in years, or I would give a massage and the person would book back in. And all of this external validation really fed me. But where that becomes an issue is when you see 10 clients in a day, for example, and 9 of them think you're amazing, tell you that you're amazing, and you have that one person halfway through your day that goes, yeah, it was all right. I would hold on to that one person. So instead of those 9 people that had all told me something was great, I would hold on to that one person. Maybe they didn't even say it was, it was bad. They just went, yeah, it was an okay massage, or yeah, I've had better leg waxes. That was what, and I could hold on to that for weeks, months, even years. And it would influence me. It would make me question, am I good at what I do? Should I be doing what I do? Maybe I should change. Maybe I'm too loud. Maybe I'm too quiet. Maybe I'm not skilled enough. All of these doubts and questions would come up in my mind, and that came from a lack of confidence when I was younger. Nobody saw that in me because I've always been very chatty. I've always been very outgoing. But that was a facade that very much hid this person who was just terrified of people not liking her, terrified that someone would say, you're not good enough, or you're not right for that place, or whatever it might be. I was so influenced by the outside world. And when my world collapsed, as I talked about earlier, when that happened, it was the trigger that started a whole series of growth that helped me to step out of my own way and to say, okay, there are times when people may say things to me, or I might hear things about myself, and I actually recognize they're very valid. Fine, that's opportunity for growth. There are other times when I hear things about myself and I'm reminded of, I want to say it's Eleanor Roosevelt that said this, but I might be wrong. But this famous quote is, other people's opinion about you are none of your business. And I think that quote is actually quite magical. What someone else thinks about you really is none of your business. And who cares anyway? If somebody's in your life to support you, that's great. If somebody's in your life to challenge you, you know what? That's great.
Yes, I love that quote. It's like it always sticks with me because it's like it's so powerful. It's so powerful. It says everything that you need to know. But for that person that's stuck in the middle of it right now, who is constantly worried about what people are thinking, or when they get critical feedback, then it like sends them down a rabbit hole. What would you say to that woman?
Yeah, well, first off, you're not alone. I totally hear you. And I've been there, I've been that person. How did I get out of that rabbit hole? I started to take my thoughts to court. Now, I'm sure I am stealing someone else's phrase when I say that. I'm not the first person to use that as a metaphor, but I take my thoughts to court constantly. Whenever I start to think something that feels bad in my body. Now, let me just make sense of that, because there's some people listening that might think, what do you mean by that? As a yoga teacher, as a body worker, many years of massaging people, I've spent a lot of time getting very tuned into my body and the messages that it gives you. Your body is talking to you all the time. Whether we choose to pay attention to it or not, that's another story. But your body is constantly telling you stuff. And when you have thoughts, or when you use your words, your body reacts. And it might react in ways where you have physical sensation. That tightening in your tummy when maybe you say something and you realize that, oh, maybe that wasn't the right thing to say in that particular situation. Or it might be a heaviness that descends upon you, or indeed at the other end of the scale, a lightness that comes over you. All of these things are messages. So when I have a thought, and I can feel my body, I feel myself curling inwards, collapsing downwards. The sensations in my body are uncomfortable. and I know this thought is taking me somewhere that I don't really want to go. I take that thought to court and I start asking myself questions. Now, this is where you have to get very objective, and it takes a little bit of time when you first start out. This isn't something that you just snap your fingers, oh, yeah, I'm great with this now. You've got to keep doing it. It's like going to the gym and lifting weights. You're not going to lift the heavy weights first of all. You've got to lift the light ones first. So you've got to keep doing it. But asking yourself questions. Is this a thought or is this a fact? Is a great question to ask yourself. And if it's a thought, what evidence is there that this is even true? And just there's a number of questions that you can go through with yourself, simply breaking down whether this thought is something that needs to be paid attention to or whether this thought is something that needs to be dismissed. And there's a really interesting thing that happens when you start to take your thoughts to court. When you start to question them, you start to break them down and you look for the evidence. Is it true? Is it not? It kind of dissipates and fades into the background, and all those sensations in your body, that tightness, that feeling that you have eases. And you might notice a new thought coming up. I recognize that this person might see me in this way, and perhaps in future I can make them more comfortable. In my case, let me give you an example of this. In my case, I'm an incredibly loud individual. I've been loud since the day I was born. I only have two volumes, loud and asleep. That's all there is, right? There is nothing in between. And for a lot of people, when I walk into a room, I'm quite overwhelming. I'm a lot to take on board. And I get that. I get that I am not everybody's cup of tea. Who is, right? And often there might be situations where someone will say to me, "Oh, Lorna, you were a bit loud," or you need to tone it down a little bit. And there are times when I recognize, as the thought spiral goes, oh my God, I'm so loud and nobody likes me because and I need to stop saying stuff, and I speak too fast, and I should be more understanding, and all of this spiral starts to happen. I take those thoughts to court. Is it true? Is it a fact? Blah, blah, blah. And it may be that I recognize in a particular situation that my volume, my my vibrance, if you will, may not be appropriate, and it may not be comfortable for other people. And so I make a choice. I can dial it down a little bit in order to make other people feel more comfortable. There are other times when I might find myself thinking, I'm actually really okay with who I was in that situation. I'm really comfortable with how I behaved and how I came across. And you know what? I accept that that's your perception, but it's not mine.
I like that you dissect it a little bit, because it's so easy. As soon as somebody says something to you, then just you're like, the shame spiral, and just all the things, and it triggers everything. And yeah, it's really their own perceptions. They're like, they wouldn't be comfortable being that loud, is the truth. It really has nothing to do with you. It's how they would feel.
Yeah, exactly. And, we have to remember that there's a real there's a common thread, I think, on social media at the moment. It's been around for quite a while, actually, but in this sort of wellness bubble, people are constantly talking about their truth. Well, I just speak my truth. And I find that first of all, I find that quite an arrogant thing to say. But secondly, it's kind of, can I swear a little bit?
Yes, tell me.
Am I allowed to do that? It's just bullshit, right? Because, I'm just telling you the truth, Lorna. No, you're telling me your version of the truth. And it's not necessarily mine. It's not necessarily the person next to you or anything else. You're telling me your version of it based on your life experiences and your comfort zone and your limiting beliefs and your values, none of which may be anything to do with me. So whenever people say things like, hey, I'm just going to tell you the truth, Marie, about your podcast. Yeah, okay. That's great. But please, it's not a universal truth. It's your truth, your perception, and how you're feeling. And very much you projecting your where you're at with something. And it takes me, do you know where this takes me? Down a really random rabbit hole. But it takes me into the world of wokeness. I mean, I even hate that word. But the world of woke actually drives me crazy. And I know this is gonna be quite triggering for some people, and it's maybe gonna set a few people off. But remember, it's your truth and not mine. But the world of woke is just all about people getting super angry and going, you're not right. You're saying this thing and you shouldn't do that. And it's like, whoa, people, step back a little bit and look at your own stuff before you start telling other people what they're doing wrong and how they're not living their life in the way that they're supposed to. Like, we all need to, I think, create some space between ourselves and the things that trigger us, the things that make us feel uncomfortable, the things that set us off in those spirals. And it's in having that space that we're able to become, in yoga it's called becoming the observer of your thoughts. And I know there's other ways that people have addressed this in the past, but to become the observer allows you to do exactly what I've just done, to break things down, to ask yourself, is what I'm about to say, is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it going to benefit anyone? If I yell at this person and say, you should be doing this differently, or you should be behaving in this particular way, let me look at myself and how I'm projecting out to the world. What am I putting out into the world? How am I moving through the world? Am I doing it with kindness? Am I doing it with care? Am I being the person that I want to be? Do I like this person? If the answer to any of those questions is no, then yeah, maybe you need to look at it. But if somebody else is telling you the answer to those questions is no, yeah, maybe you need to just step back and have a think about that. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And it's like maybe you need to investigate it a little bit more if somebody else is telling you, because that might not, what they're saying might not apply to you.
Yeah, exactly. And you asked me, I feel like I've given you an incredibly long answer to what was a very short question.
No, that's fine.
You asked me a few moments ago, what advice would I give to someone who's maybe in a space where, they are taking on board the criticism, the opinions, the beliefs, the values of other people. And, I think it actually comes down to working on that loving yourself. Because when you can look at yourself and say, I am actually really okay with this person that I see in the mirror. I am really okay with how, like I said, how I move through the world, how I interact, how I am, the things that I share. I'm okay with that person. It's really hard for someone else to shake your foundation when you're in that place. And again, I know there are challenges around that. It's not always as easy as saying, well, you've just got to love yourself. Please, right? It takes time. It takes some effort. You've got to put some effort and energy into that. But that is the foundation of anything else that anybody is going to tell you. All these self-help gurus out there, and they're going to say, I've got this 5-step system, and I've got this thing, and I've got this, PDF that you can buy for 19.99, and it's going to change your world. You know what? The one thing that's going to change your world is when you start to put self-love as a priority. It's not a luxury. It's not something that you fit into your busy day if you can. It's a priority. When you start doing that, that's when magic happens.
Yes, that's what to like put the bank on or put your money on is yourself, and loving yourself
Yeah.
and investing time in yourself. I think that is huge. And it's like, why don't people talk about that at a younger age, or teach their kids that?
God, I know. Do you know? There's so many things that I don't have children, as I've said, but I look at my friends that have kids, and I see the things that they're being taught at school. I know the things that I was taught at school, and I just find myself thinking over and over again, wouldn't it be amazing if schools taught us how to resolve conflict, how to love ourselves, how to, how to prioritize not working every hour that God says, how to prioritize play and creativity and art and theatre and all of these things that are, to me, really quite undervalued in this world because we place so much value on stuff and money, and our value only comes by what we do. So I worked more hours than you this week, therefore I have greater value. It's just such a terrible way to live.
Yes, yes. And I like, I'm with you. I was that person that would work all the hours and do all the things and go, 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 go. But it's like at a certain point that doesn't work for you anymore, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So something you mentioned earlier was talking about the observer.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see if you dive into that a little bit more between like the observer, observing the thoughts in your head versus like the nonstop chatter. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, the chatter. It's like a radio that's just on all the time, isn't it? um, my own self-talk is, I say is because it can still go down that route. I want to make sure that people understand that we're all on a journey, right? And God, I know how cliched that sounds. We're all on this journey. But whatever we're doing, there is never an end to it. Now, I remember hearing this a long, long time ago when it was actually one of my very first yoga teacher trainings. And I remember one of my teachers saying, "You are now on a journey that will only end when you die." And I remember sitting in his class kind of going, "What? Wait, what?" Really? And he then went on to clarify this, and he said, self growth and learning and this development that you're doing is something that never has an end because there's always something to learn. There's always somewhere to go. And when it comes to that self chatter and becoming the observer, that is something that is just ongoing because life challenges us in different ways at different times. So meditation for me was the gateway into starting to get a little bit of control over the negative, endless negative like beating that I used to give myself. And meditation was really easy. Where I learned to meditate was quite literally, I mean, it couldn't be any more cliche, quite literally up the side of a mountain in the middle of nowhere. And it's pretty easy to get quiet and to get still when you're up the side of a mountain and everybody's doing the same thing and you're in that environment where everybody is learning and growing in the same way. And what I realized was when I came back into, I think what you would call the real world, and the real world is not silent and it is not full of people who are doing the same thing. It's not full of people who are even close to the wavelength that you are now on. And there's all kinds of stuff going on. It might be work stress, family stress. It could be the guy in the supermarket who cut in front of you at the queue, or driving stress. The real world just bombards us on a daily basis with ways in which we can beat ourselves up. And that self-talk begins and snowballs and it grows. And what I realized was that the meditation that I had learned up the side of that mountain didn't always fit into my life, and it didn't always work in the life that I was living, especially when I was traveling. I traveled so intensely for a number of years. And so travel stress, being on an airplane where, there's some guy sitting in the middle seat with his elbows at, 90 degrees, and your flight's late, you're in a new city, the stresses and as I say, the opportunity for sort of self berating was just numerous. And so there was development. How do I manage this? And that's what then sort of taught me to start to observe situations. Instead of reacting to things, I learned how to respond. Took a long time, and I'm still not great at it, Marie, if I'm being really honest. I still react to stuff. And interestingly, when I do, I do find myself going, whoa, where did that come from? Because I thought I was past that. But going back to the words of my beautiful teacher all those years ago, you're never past it. It's a journey, like an onion. You're just peeling back the layers, and there's things that you think you've dealt with, and then something will trigger you, and whoosh, it comes up again. But the difference is having the tools to say, all right, where did that come from, and how can I maybe prevent it from happening again, or how can I take the edge off it from happening again? Maybe you can't prevent it. Maybe it's going to be something that comes up over and over. I don't know. But it's about having that maturity and not going back into the self chatter, but coming back to your breath, doing something that breaks the cycle of chatter. These are the two things that I find in the real world work best for me. So it might be something as simple as doing some physical movement. If I'm sitting working at the computer and something's happening, I can feel myself getting angry, stressed, whatever. Just getting up and like doing 10 jumping jacks. Boom, boom, boom. And my brain's kind of going, why are we doing jumping jacks when we're having an argument with that person via email? You've broken the pattern. You can come back to it objectively. Does that make sense? Anything at all? In NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, there's a phrase that's often used. Can you smell fish? When you want someone to break a pattern, you ask them a really random question that makes them go, wait, what? but we were talking about my relationship with my father when I was 5, and you've just asked me if I could smell fish. This is how you break the cycle, because your thoughts are only as powerful as the attention you give them. The moment you take attention away from them, they're like ghosts. They disappear. You know that old that idea that you can only ever see a ghost out the corner of your eye, because the moment you turn and look at it, it's gone, right?
Right.
It's the same with your thoughts, only in reverse. The more attention you give to your thoughts, the more powerful they become. The second you take your attention away from them, they just like mist. They dissolve. And you're then in a more resourceful state to manage whatever situation you're in or whatever thought you're having. And you can take that objective view, taking your thoughts to court, asking the questions, doing all of the things that I talked about earlier. But all it takes is anything that interrupts your pattern.
So good. This is really like a mindset masterclass. I love it. Oh, to beers. Can you smell fish? Remember that. Just distract yourself for a little bit.
Yep, that's it. Just randomly ask anyone who's having if you've got kids that are having a tantrum or like losing their mind at some point, ask them some really random question and see how they respond.
Yes. So, Lorna, I know we're winding down here, but one question I gotta ask you is, do you have any advice for the women that's in the arena living? I just totally jacked that up. For the woman that's in the arena trying to live the life that she wants.
Yeah. Oh God, it's like I can't make it. It sounds impossibly simple, but I've got to go all Nike on this one and say, just do it. And I know there's going to be people listening saying, well, it's all right for you. Oh, it's easy for you to say that. It's not easy for me to say that. For goodness sake, did you listen to my story at the beginning? I literally lost everything in my life and I still just did it. It's not, when something is simple, it's not necessarily easy. Okay, the two things are not the same, but the simplest route to anything you want is to just do it. Now that doesn't mean jacking in your job and going rogue and trying to do your own thing or whatever. There's steps that you can take to temper the shock of whatever it is you're going to change. But I think the first thing that anybody needs to do, and we're not always very good at that. And actually, this comes down to a little bit of meditation and breath work really helps with this. You've got to know what it is you want before you can go out and get it. And so often we think we know what we want, but in reality, we don't. Our mind is firing off in all different directions. And maybe we say, I don't want to work a 9 to 5 anymore. And maybe we say, I don't want to be in this relationship. Or maybe we say, whatever. But somewhere in the back of our mind, we kind of do still want to be in that relationship, and we kind of do still want to be in that job. And as a result, we're not clear on the path that we want to go on. If we're not clear on that path, then we're never going to get there. So you can change your job and you can find a new relationship, but actually you're probably just going to find the same stuff again and again. And so I think that the foundation for any change that you want to make is taking the time to get super, super clear on, where do I want to be? If here is not where I want to be, where do I want to be? And actually that might lead you to recognize that here kind of is where you want to be. Maybe it needs some tweaking, maybe it needs a little bit of changing, but here is actually where I want to be.
So good. Lorna, how can we connect with you? I think it just
You can connect with me in all kinds of ways. So you can go to lornagreenyoga.life is my website. I'm all over social media, Lorna Green Yoga on Facebook and Instagram. I've just started the world of tiki-talkie because it just seemed like a lot of fun, and I thought, why not? So if you do want to connect with me over on TikTok, it's Scottish Yoga Life. And just reach out if you've got questions. If there's something that I can help you with, then just shoot me a DM on social media. I'm always happy to have a conversation.
Lorna,
You can tell.
No, you've been a total badass, and I've enjoyed hearing your story. Thank you for coming on.
Amazing.
Yeah. And with that, we'll end our show. To all the badass women out there staying in the arena, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, own it and get after it.